How no one would change the
Will
war?
you ever finish Rockstar famous game
Since Russia invaded
PhD
Ukraine,
years
maps
and
of the
you're still on
conflict are
chapter
everywhere.
3 and you
In
did
most
only
cases,
did all the side quests, so it's not much progress was lost, Pepog.
Perhaps. I don't know yet about that.
shaded areas like this red are meant to symbolize territory occupied by Russian forces, or at least territory Russia and Ukraine are fighting over. In general, this red is referring to ground troops like these. The more the Russian ground troops advance, the more of the map turns red. But what maps like these don't show is another battle that's taking place high above Ukraine, where a small Ukrainian air force is fighting a powerful Russian one for control of the skies.
Ground, air, space.
What happens here could determine not just the course of the war, but whether it escalates and spreads beyond Ukraine. It's why Ukraine's allies are scrambling to send it weapons, and some are asking to go a step further.
No-fly zone.
No-fly zone. A no-fly zone.
A humanitarian no-fly zone.
No-fly zone. It seems to make sense.
Well, I think that you all know what I'm going to say. We need the no-fly zone over Ukraine.
So why are the stakes of this air war so high, and what would a no-fly zone change?
Wait. Guys, I don't get it, you guys. I don't get it. No-fly zone for who though? For everybody? For everybody? I didn't understand it.
On February 24th, 2022, the Russian invasion of Ukraine began.
Well, but guys, if you have passengers, guys, and you're going from one place to another with passengers that are just flying to go to, I don't know, Australia, and yet they have to go over the country, what are they gonna do? They're gonna fly over, they're gonna fly in the missiles and shit? What? I don't get it.
And in terms of military strategy, it followed a common script. First, Russian missiles targeted Ukraine's radar system, then its airfields and some missile launchers. To military experts, this appeared to be preparation for a crucial step: send a lot of planes to destroy the Ukrainian Air Force and achieve what's called air superiority.
So when we say a military has air superiority, what we're essentially saying that is a military more or less controls the skies.
With air superiority, Russia could freely attack Ukrainian ground troops and protect its own ground troops, who could move faster without fear of being attacked from the skies.
If Russia were able to establish virtually unchallenged air superiority, it would be a disaster for Ukraine. Doesn't mean you're guaranteed a victory.
Wait, what? Guys, I don't mean to be weird about it. Guys, I'm just asking. This is a question, guys. Is this a normal thing to mount an AK to heli?
Superiority, it would be a disaster for Ukraine.
This feels kind of
doesn't
bad.
mean you're guaranteed a victory, but it makes that victory a heck of a lot more likely.
That's why since World War II, winning air superiority has been the first step in most invasions. But in this case, the biggest—
Because the mag is pretty small. You don't have a lot of ammo. It's very unstable, and I mean, you don't have much accuracy. So I don't know.
Attack never came, and experts don't really agree on why.
My best informed guess is that the Russians thought that they would be welcomed when they got there. And so when they saw men, women, and children blocking their tank from entering the Ukrainian village, that surprised them. And when you make war plans, including
it's an RPK,
plans related to air superiority, and if your assumptions are wrong, then your plan is messed up.
Whatever happened, it means that more than 2 weeks into the invasion, Russia did not have total air superiority. It allowed the Ukrainian Air Force to defend themselves against some Russian fighter jets and ground forces, helping bog down the Russian invasion. This was celebrated as part of Ukraine's remarkable resistance early on in the war.
It's a function of both Ukrainian success and also some surprising shortcomings in Russian military capability.
But it might not last much longer.
Guys, that was a drone. It's an operated drone by nobody. Nobody's inside of it. It's a drone. It's a drone.
When you compare the Russian military and the Ukrainian military, there is no comparison. In every major metric of power, the Russian military is far more powerful, including when it comes to aviation.
Russia has more than 10 times the number of fighter aircraft as Ukraine.
That's
and
it?
So far, they
Only
haven't
10
really
times.
used them.
It's possible over the coming days and weeks that Putin and his military leaders decide to make greater use of Russian aircraft. And I think that's already happening. They're entering a new phase where, in my view, they're systematically using air power in part to systematically attack civilians and civilians.
Okay.
Their invasion and likely cause significant civilian casualties. So Ukraine's allies are frantically trying to keep that from happening. Many countries are sending weapons that Ukrainian ground troops can use to shoot down Russian aircraft. And there have been talks about sending Ukraine planes. But there's also been talk of another kind of help, a no-fly zone. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has asked NATO, the Western military alliance, to declare a no-fly zone. A number of U.S. foreign policy experts have called for a limited no-fly zone, and a recent poll shows that 74% of Americans think the U.S. should declare one. So, what is a no-fly zone? Basically, it's a geographic area where certain planes are prohibited from flying. The point of NATO declaring a no-fly zone over Ukraine would be to prevent Russia from winning air superiority, thereby protecting Ukraine's military and civilians. But what makes a no-fly zone complicated is how NATO would have to enforce it.
Yeah, I'm so confused.
The no-fly zone in Ukraine, if you're going to be serious about it, you have to consider that to enforce it, to make it a real thing, we would actually have to shoot down Russian aircraft.
This means NATO would be directly participating in the conflict, escalating the war to involve the US and most of Europe.
An establishment of a no-fly zone sooner or later puts us in a high risk of direct combat.
I know what everybody's like, oh guys, as I see how people that are very misinformed, it's like, oh yeah, but then they would win. Guys, if NATO were to get involved, I think, if NATO were to get actually involved, they would win instantaneously. But then it would make Russia mauled. It would make and then you have a fucking World War III or some shit, right? Isn't that how it works? Of course, NATO can win. Of course they could, but I think they're trying to be indirectly non-participants that are participating in certain ways. But I think the no-fly zone means that they're very, very directly involved, and then now you have your World War III because then you're gonna maul because that's a very involved way of being involved, motherfucker. Like,
and most of Europe.
An establishment of a no-fly zone sooner or later puts us in a high risk of direct combat. And don't for a minute think that you can control how that escalates. Once one aircraft gets shot down, whether it's ours or theirs, all bets are off on what happens next. Russia is a nuclear-armed power. Putin's been making a lot of threats to suggest that he thinks nuclear weapons might be an option.
All of this would also be true of a limited no-fly zone, which would only cover certain areas, but would be enforced in the same way. Putin has vowed to treat anyone imposing a no-fly zone as a participant in the conflict. And so far, President Biden and NATO leaders have ruled it out.
Nobody wins in
So
war.
for now, even while it's...
Question, because this is a question against people that know the answer or not. Okay, if you don't know the answer, don't tell me. Does Russia have enough equipment to consistently launch some of their armament? I understand that having a nuclear weapon is one thing. Being able to launch them at high distances is a complete other thing, right? Do they have enough equipment, or they actually use a lot of it? Oh, they do.
Allies send weapons, Ukraine will have to do the fighting themselves.
Every bone in my body wants to help Ukrainians. They're fighting for all of us, and I weep when I see some of these images.
Guys, because this
reminds
you again. It reminds you a little bit of the Cold War. Why was it so important for somebody to land on the moon? Why was it so important to display that they have the superiority? And if they want to launch nuclear missiles, they can. How? Because nuclear weapons aren't only launched in the air, they have to be launched in space. That's how they get them down, is that they actually have to go outside of the stratosphere, right? And they have to go into space for them to... Guys, how do people not know this? How are we in 2022 and people don't fucking know this? Yes. They have to go into space. Yes.
All that we can to help Ukraine.
Yes, absolutely.
Also everything we can to avoid direct conflict with Russia.
Of course they do. Dumb fuck. Guys, the early attempts of fucking Russia at Sputnik or whatever.
Hi.
What do you think those are? Do you think that Sputnik is a nice, a cool space shuttle? It's a fucking rocket. It was a rocket made to carry fucking bomb. Are you okay, dude? Dude.